watching your video.
And you guys are live.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Project SIP's special Climate Change Edition, the facts, the fiction, the future. We have a wonderful panel lined up tonight, and we're really going to just dig in on some of the facts of climate change, some of the fictions, and what the future looks like. And so with that, I'd like to introduce a couple of our newest members on our panel. I'd like to start off with Tara.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Great to have you, Tara. Tell us a little bit about what brings you on our climate change panel tonight.
Yeah, I'm good friends with Hannah, and she knows how much I care about climate. And I study the way that the media reports on climate change and how they frame it in a certain way that affects our behaviors. And just I'm interested in deducing that and kind of looking behind it.
Very nice. Welcome. And I'd also like to introduce Thor to our broadcast tonight. Thor, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey, how's it going, everyone? My name's Thor. Oh gosh, I got my degrees in environmental science and geography. I'm currently working on my master's in environmental planning and resource management. Yeah, so I'm excited to talk some climate tonight. Let's do it.
And with that, let's do it. Let's get started. So we're going to start off with the facts. Right now, when we look at a historical perspective, 19 of the last 20 hottest years on record have literally been since the year 2001. That has coincided with increases in CO2 emissions, methane, as well as things that are going with our climate and our weather patterns. So with that, I want to kick the first question off to Electra. Just speaking about, the cascading effects of behavioral change, managed retreat. Just tell us your thoughts, on, how you feel about, this information.
Yeah, that's a good question. I do think there are undeniable effects that impact our day-to-day and long-term behaviors. And cascading effects, for those who don't know, kind of has that meaning of from A to B to C with a clear correlation, in this case, between climate change and behavior change and societal pattern fluctuations, things like that. So I do think it's important to bring in examples. For instance, like when the world is getting warmer and droughts are occurring, it's causing communities to use and even deplete different resources like water, which then leads to changes in migration patterns. Or you can see more disease when temperatures go up and mosquitoes move into new areas, and that creates new medical, need for new medical research or even medical resources. So that changes our economic and our health systems. In terms of managed retreat, I do think that's a pretty interesting topic, especially on the West Coast, where in my home county of San Diego, you've got wealthy homeowners on coastlines having to move because sea level rise is eroding the bluffs and putting homes at risk. And then we see changes of gentrification, right, from those folks moving inland to other communities. So, of course, these changes are impacting our behaviors. You would move to if the ocean was creeping into your backyard, but cascading effects of climate change are already here. They're not things to prepare for, they're things to mitigate and to adapt to while we still can. And I will say on a positive note, there are positive behavior changes coming from this movement. The awareness has pushed the tech and the transportation industries to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. People are learning about composting, best practices at home. And just looking at the science can really help to understand how behaviors will change over time. And there are reliable tools used by experts in the field, but you don't have to be an expert in the field to understand that science. Those tools are available online. Things like CalAdapt is used by statewide climate action planners to write climate action plans. I've used that tool myself to help with a city climate action plan. Things like the CalEnviroscreen to show different communities affected, environmental justice, those types of topics. So I do think there are undeniable effects on our behavior, and I'd love to hear other people's thoughts on that.
Electra, thank you. That was actually very enlightening. I actually didn't know that, I would think of what we can do is this big, large thing, but when you actually break it down that way, there's things that individually can do and actually resources to kind of break it down on a more granular level. So thank you very much for that. And Thor, I know you want to get in.
Yeah, just a quick point. I mean, yeah, you're exactly right, Electra. And I think something to keep in mind too, just in terms of like environmental justice, is focusing on the most vulnerable communities who are most heavily impacted by climate change. And, exactly what you're talking about with gentrification, other things as well that are putting our most vulnerable communities at risk. People who are already vulnerable, who might not have access to healthcare, who might, all sorts of different things, who might not have access to being able to move, so yeah, it's important. And that's not just within the United States. I mean, obviously you have problems with that here, but all around the world, mass migrations are just gonna keep getting bigger, wars and everything. So it's definitely important to keep in mind how we take care of and protect the most vulnerable communities.
Thank you for that, Thor. Because last time I checked, we only have one Earth, and unless I've been proven differently about it. So continuing on, as a consequence of the Earth's warming, scientists have been collecting data on a range of correlating phenomena, from sea level rise, melting glaciers in both the northern and southern hemispheres, and rising oceanic temperatures. I want to take this question to Tara. What are your thoughts on some of the consequences you foresee if we continue on?
Yeah, it's important to remember that, like Electra said, she used the term cascading effect, but I call it exponential growth. It's that if something small happens, it'll affect, like 4 small things that will also happen. And a good way to think about this is like the ice in the Arctic. It's warming more because of the atmosphere, the CO2 in the atmosphere, but it's also warming from beneath also because like the oceans are getting warmer. So because of the increased CO2, it's actually, it's warming from the top and the bottom now. So things like that are just keep being discovered like all the time by climate scientists, because this is a relatively new scientific field. So some consequences that I see are that since everything is connected in our world, our food, our water, and like this really very stable atmosphere that we've had in the Holocene is going to be completely disrupted. And and just the complex like systems of our way of life that we rely on to just be able to go to the grocery store and like get whatever food we want, that will just be destroyed.
Well, those definitely sound consequential. And, really, when we think about that, yeah, I think we can see this as a cause to action, because one thing about consequences, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So if we do nothing, those consequences are going to be severe. But if we do come together, not only as a society, but as a planet, I think that can definitely, have something, positive, for our planet and for each other. And I actually want to circle back to Thor for a quick point.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I took climatology classes and bioclimatology classes, and we talked a lot about cascading effects and feedback loops, especially. So when you're talking about, yeah, exactly what you're talking about, like it's, the melting of the polar ice caps in its own right reduces basically the reflectivity. Ice, snow, it's white, it's highly reflective, but water is it's not as reflective as ice is. It actually like absorbs more heat. So when you lose that layer of permafrost, when you lose that layer of ice caps, that just increases this feedback loop of continuous heating. And to be perfectly honest, the consequences of this kind of feedback loop heating is kind of not known, which is almost more frightening than if maybe we had an idea of what it was going to do, because there are so many different cycles at play here that's yeah, it's kind of a scary thing. So let's work together to mitigate this climate change issue if we can.
I like that, Thor. That's a good word, mitigate. I wanna briefly circle back to Electra because one thing you mentioned earlier, glancingly, was environmental justice. And Thor mentioned that as well. I want to touch in on that a little bit more granular, in a little bit more granular way. Tell us what you mean by environmental justice and how that particularly hits, minorities and the lower income bracket as it compares to the effects of climate change.
Yeah, it's a popular term right now, and something I hope everybody can take from this is that while it's an emerging concept that came kind of around in the 80s and early 90s, the term has multiple uses. I would say mostly describing social movements that focus on like fair distribution of environmental benefits. And then we're also focusing on how each state kind of interprets that and how resources are going to be distributed based on what they deem as a disadvantaged community. It's a unique term. Not everyone likes that. In California, that state agencies use that to explain, or I guess to divvy up certain pots of cash that go to environmental programs. There's maps for that online that people can look at and see where their census tracts are. I think it's a really poignant moment to discuss that. Again, I'd like to hear other people's points of view, but in San Diego County, down here on the southern part of the state, we do deal with things like I would say disequilibrium, if that's the right term. And it's hard to get people on board to have that conversation when they're in a wealthier tax bracket because it's not affecting them, right? Or they have access to more solutions. And they don't even realize that their solution is a solution. It's just a lucky thing that they might have, like an air conditioning unit. So we see that in LA. I'd like to hear other people's examples from other regions because I know I'm one of the only SoCal people down here. So how is that affecting Northern California in the environmental justice space? Anybody seeing any examples
That's a
of
great
that?
question. Any of our Northern California panelists want to jump in on that one? I can definitely say as a fellow Northern California person, I happen to work in finance and banking, and so I see a lot of the effects, from a multifaceted level, how it affects people with wealth, but also how things can affect people that don't have that wealth, that don't have the ability to buy another house, move to an area that has, less pollution. And so, what I'm seeing is economically, people are really being hamstrung by not having the means and resources, to really deal with this climate catastrophe that's oncoming. They're really stuck in a place where they have to be reliant on the government to to really make things better. It's not happening right now, but I think together we can really try to make things happen. So that was a great question. So really, really, really appreciate that. And I believe Thor also wanted to chime in.
Yeah, in some of the discussions I've had with my classmates and colleagues, we've talked about this, this idea of the scope and scale of vulnerability among different people, and things like the California fires, for example. They affect everyone, and in fact, they might affect more people who are living on the edges of the forest with bigger houses and stuff like that. But then, of course, you have smoke, right? The intense amounts of smoke, which is going to, more intensely affect, people who, suffering from asthma, or, especially people who don't have access to, air filters or good healthcare. So yeah, it's definitely the impacts and effects on different groups is wide and varied, but yeah, I think there is a huge importance to focusing on people who don't have access to the kinds of resources that would hugely benefit them.
That's a great point, Thor. So you would say that, having a more fair and equitable society as far as pertaining to resources, not only would be the right thing to do for people, but also for our planet. Nice, nice. And Tara, I believe you had something to add in.
Yeah, I just like I agree that like I think everybody wants a more fair and equitable environment. And I don't know, I just think that also as we can also help these like vulnerable communities that are most affected by climate change, maybe we could also like think ahead and like help them in the future by like stopping some of the climate change through regulating corporations more and for like just I mean, kind of getting a bit authoritarian in that aspect. Um,
Now, I'm going to ask a quick follow-up, Tara. At least give me one example of something that we can do, from a regulatory perspective that you see could be beneficial.
oh, that just regular people can do as an individual.
As far as regulation.
Oh, as far as regulations, oh man, I mean, I like I feel like we should protect the earth as much as possible. I would like to like stop all consumerism. I mean, that's that's my ideal world, but there's like all sorts of regulations that we could do. Just in terms of cutting back on like air flights and things like that.
Okay. By the way, Tara, I love your energy. Just want you to know that. And Jake, I know you want to jump in.
So we've got the disproportionate issue of those who have less being affected more by the problems created by those who have more. So let's, I don't know, institute a weighted tax on the organizations, whatever they may be, that cause their proportion of environmental impact, and then take all that money and apply it to helping the most disenfranchised and most ill-affected people.
That sounds very progressive, but when you really dig down into it, Jake, that actually sounds very free market. Taking a behavior and applying a market-based solution, and then having those resources go to another section of society. And so for those who, some of our climate denial people who say, hey, we can't do that because the free market is everything. Well, you just offered a very progressive free market solution. So thank you for that point. And we did have Hannah on deck, but I think she's going to skip on this one. So what I want to do is actually transition to a much more interesting topic. And that really is the fiction of climate change, because those of you know that a lot of fictions out there, a lot of falsehoods, a lot of things that are said by the rich and powerful class, those that don't want things to change. And unfortunately, some of these techniques filter into the society at large. And so we definitely have to do some re-education. So I actually want to take this right back to Jake. One of the fictions that gets thrown out there the most is that climate change is just another part of the Earth's natural climate cycle. What are your thoughts on that talking point?
I mean, first and foremost, I think it's just insidious, manipulative nonsense, because it's based on truth. The Earth does have great cycles of climate change that you can look at throughout history. It's just true. But humanity has had a notable, quantifiable effect on our environment, to the point where we're talking about naming an epoch of time after our effect, because we'll be able to see, plastic in the soil in 1 trillion years. Like we've had an effect that will last, and the effect on the environment is something that we've only recently started studying, to the point where we really have the capacity to quantify it, but it's just obvious. So utilizing a truth to hide a much more insidious lie is, if you ask me, brilliant, but just absolutely despicable.
Now, I want to follow up on that one, because you've struck on an interesting point on this. When we talk about these insidious actors and actions that they partake in, what should be consequences? What are some ways to mitigate this type of behavior?
Beheading, yeah.
So dust off the guillotines?
I mean, like, my first response is mostly humor. Don't get me wrong. I would like to see legit accountability. We've had, you know, crimes against humanity. What about crimes against the world? I think dropping nukes is one of them. I think that all of the tragedies that we've created. I mean, we're at the point where our economic interactions or ecological interactions are well past the scope of one company or one nation solving the problem. Like Fukushima or the oil spill in the Gulf. That, like, these are problems, and one group can't handle it, and we're not doing very well at taking care of that. I'd like to see real like Nuremberg level reparations. Like, these people should be held accountable, period. And you know what? The military is one of the most problematic entities in the entire world for climate change. So, like, some change needs to happen.
Well, I'll tell you, that's a can of worms right there. When you talk about the military-industrial complex, we can go with that all night. But I do believe that Hannah's on deck with it takes. So Hannah, take it away.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a note that for the people that say that climate change is just part of Earth's natural cycles, I think that is very clearly not paying attention to the specific details that are available that we'll have access to. There have been countless studies, observations, and content found as to affirm that global warming is real and happening, and that there are a multitude of other changes happening to our world that are not common and not good for us, and are have significant consequences. And so I just think that, you know, if someone were to come and say that to me, I would want to get down to the nitty-gritty examples, and it doesn't have to go over all of them. I bet just a couple handfuls of them would be enough to kind of shift someone's perspective of it. I think people are just not as informed as they could be, and there's plenty of data out there to bring them up to speed on.
You bring up a really great point, Hannah, and I'd like to just ask a quick follow-up question on that. When we talk about, you know, having these conversations and utilizing the data to change the narrative, what are some ways that we can, you know, try to counteract, you know, some of this, you know, false information, as well as, you know, try to educate people who truly haven't had the chance to get the exposure to this knowledge?
Well, I think a good place to start is where people are, what people are comfortable or familiar with. Like, just as an example, people really care about what's in their backyard versus things that they can't see or know about. So when you ask somebody what their values are in their community and their local nature and what they enjoy about the earth, then diving into those specific things that they speak to and bringing up, you know, what big business has done to that, and what people and animals and nature are given, like, the remnants of after business is done with that. I think that doing that, bringing the focus to, okay, well, what do you value about your ideal world, and well, then let's look into those specific things and see, well, what's really happening, and you know, where's the interest at? And most, in all cases, I feel like the interest is in making money, corporate priority, and how they take care of things and how they don't want to pay for things. And I think most people can come around to it when they see specific examples, and we just need to be able to have conversations long enough to get to the specific examples that matter.
That's a great pick. Thank you for that. I want to go to Anna next.
Yeah, I think Hannah's right. You know, our corporations need to do more. There is a framework right now that analyzes what companies are doing in comparison to their peers. It's the ESG, Environmental Social Governance. And what this pretty much measures, and I'm going to read off of what I wrote because I've actually studied this a little bit. So the E pretty much measures water waste, water usage, like what the resources are you consuming. The S pretty much measures how you're treating your clients, how you're treating your workers, and the G is pretty much how the company is being run. So I think that this has some good and some bad, like everything. The good is that we can compare how company A is doing versus company B, and company B versus company C, and so on. Where I think it falls short, and maybe someone else can come in, is that because it is the framework, everyone has a different mindset of what's important and what's not. Some people may think water usage is more important than how the company is being ran or how it's treated as employees versus how, how much usage they have in electricity and so on. So there are some shortcomings, but there is something going on right now that companies are using and moving in the correct direction. Now there's more that they can do. Obviously, there's more than the government can do. There's regulations, there's taxations, but we'll add some links onto what companies can do right now, which is, pretty much knowing that there's a problem and not just saying there's a problem, great, let's work on it. No, it's pretty much there's a problem, we need to do something about it, and not just use it as some type of positive publicity and say, hey, there's a problem, we're doing this. There's no, in the next 10, 15, 20 years, it's more, there's a problem, and this is what we're doing right now.
Interesting. And I want to follow up on that because, while we're on the corporate aspect and we're still technically talking about some of the falsehoods of climate change, I think from a corporate perspective, I've always found it interesting when in the corporate sector and people who are purely supply side, trickle down free market economists, when they say is climate change regulation can't be done because it's going to put too much strain on the private sector, or it's going to cost jobs or increase prices to consumers, when there actually has been empirical data that shows that investments in climate change, in renewable energies, corporations have actually seen an increase in jobs. So what are your thoughts on that?
That's true. There's plenty of data that proves that they have more jobs, and the ESG actually allows investors to choose where they're going to invest. So if they see a company that says, we strongly believe that water usage is really important, and this is what we're doing to prevent that, you as an investor can choose to invest your money in that corporation, that company. Or you can say, you know what, for me, it's more important how you treat your employees, and that's what I care, which is the S. They can choose to invest their money that way.
Anna, I have definitely learned something new tonight. That was awesome. Thank you so much. And I know Thor wanted to jump in on this one as well. Thor, take it away.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks. Awesome info, Anna. I'm loving everything I'm learning here. As a student of the environment, this is great. This is great stuff. I just want to add in terms of quote like job loss and hits to the private sector and to the economy and stuff. I feel like unfortunately, in some ways, such a huge crisis, a global, national, international crisis is actually a good opportunity for jobs in a weird way, because a lot of work has to be done, right? We have to fix so many infrastructures. We have to create entire new systems, and that takes a lot of technological knowledge, technical knowledge. It takes a lot of construction. It takes a lot of labor, hard labor, and all of those things are great job opportunities. Similar to after the Great Depression with the New Deal, right? There is a huge need for a massive overhaul of a lot of our infrastructure, and that's prime real estate for jabs.
I like it. All right, and so I believe Electra had a comment.
Yeah, I just wanted to to add a paralleling comment to Anna's statement about ESG, that is it's a growing market, especially with millennial investors, but it's something that has been kind of existing in the background in this conversation on the economic side, not to be confused. I mean, economy versus stock market, I know those are different, but you can look at how businesses and the backing of companies on this ESG list that exists is growing at a substantial rate. There's even green bonds now that can help rebuild shorelines and sea level, rise-ridden islands. Yeah, I think Europe is actually buying into those bonds for like Indonesia. So there is a little bit of a teeter-totter of how you're going to mitigate for like, who's taking over a country and their infrastructure, right? And that I think also gets into this conversation about carbon offsets, which can be kind of a delicate ethics conversation. And I won't go into down that wormhole right now, but there's a lot to be unpacked there when you're looking at big industry like the airlines that are buying up these carbon offsets, to appear that instead of just changing the way they're doing something, they're doing the good thing, right, by purchasing this offset so that they don't, they're offsetting their carbon footprint. So I think there's a lot that whole the ESG market is still developing. I feel like it could go either direction, like good or evil. I'm not sure, but it's not just today's numbers and today's costs. It's the trends that are important. It's watching where the companies are sourcing materials. It's where people are shifting their investments based on climate change, the beliefs, right? And it's gotten to the point where the global economy is already responding to climate change, and they don't even really know it. Sometimes we don't know that's happening. So I think we will see some very innovative advancements in clean energy and hydrogen and carbon offsets, everything here and in the near future.
Electra, that is amazing. Thank you so much for that. And listening to you just make that point and speak on that, what you're saying sounds vaguely familiar to the financial markets. Just thinking of my financial analyst hat, when we're talking about, markets and targeted investments, moving around funds, literally sounds like the stock market and the financial markets in general. And so, again, it just sounds like for those that say, doing something about climate change is going to throw a monkey wrench into the free market, it sounds like some of our best things that we can do are actually free market oriented solutions. But to your point, they could be for good or for evil. So definitely something to be mindful of. And Anna, I believe you had something you wanted to add.
Yeah, I want to go back to job creation, because I feel, and maybe you guys can chip in on this, that especially during an election year, we care about how many jobs were created. We're not necessarily thinking about how many well-paying jobs were created, just how many jobs were created. And when we think about the environment and all the positivity, all the positive jobs that we can bring in, they are higher skills jobs. We need engineers, we need technicians, we need all of these jobs to be created. Is going to take time because we need these people to go to school and learn these skills. And construction, obviously, is a very well-paid job. We have the labor for it. I just think that we should start worrying so much more about the environment to where we start creating these jobs versus saying we don't have the resources when we do, and actually start creating these jobs, because they are very well-paid jobs.
That's a good point, Anna, especially when you talk about things right now. We're in the middle of a pandemic. You have, millions that are unemployed, but we also have a need to save our planet. Why not utilize this, unfortunate, opportunity to really shift that priority and create those jobs, of the future. So I couldn't agree with you more, Anna. Thank you so much for that point. And what I kind of want to do now is, this is going to be the subject that is actually going to be the most time consuming, because this is where the rubber hits the road. What I want to talk about now is, what does the future look like? For climate change, for the planet, for the United States. And I actually want to start off with talking about, climate change and national security. The reason why I talk about national security, studies have shown that if the Earth continues to warm and temperatures continue to rise, for every degree of increase in the climate change, is going to literally cause climate refugees. So we're talking about increased wars over resources. You think the immigration argument is bad in the United States now? Imagine immigration worldwide when people are fleeing rising sea levels and scorched earth. And so I'd like to actually start on this one with Jake on your thoughts on, how climate change and national security, we can talk about, the United States, or we can talk about it from a worldwide perspective. The floor is yours.
I mean, just starting real close to home, everything's burning, and that's just unacceptable in a number of ways. And at the same time, the president mocks us for not having raked. So national security, like, I mean, it's almost a joke at this point. There's no one at the top to deal with security. It's a left and right issue. Like and I don't mean politically, I mean, it's happening left and right, like all over the country. We've got insane hurricanes, more hurricanes this year globally than I mean, we went through the whole naming cycle. That's, I mean, cool, right? That's a real nifty factoid. It's also terrifying. If the top brass and political authorities cared about this the way they should, our education system would be restructured to encourage a large swath of people to study the fields that are needed in order to solve these problems. That's not what they're focused on. They're focused on churning out more dollars. The simple fact is the free market is a disgusting monster that if it isn't reined in with well-intentioned, thorough, intelligently designed, not by like, a god, but like by smart people, regulations, it will eat the world and leave us to rot.
And I want to get a quick follow-up question on that too, because when we talk about the Pentagon, I know we mentioned earlier that the military-industrial complex is actually one of the largest contributors to climate change. The Pentagon and the Department of Defense has actually come out with an internal study that actually showed the national security risk of climate change, and yet that report was shelved for obvious political reasons. What can we do as far as pressuring our leadership, our elected officials, to actually have transparency on that?
I'm sorry, were you asking me that?
Yes, that was a follow-up.
Well, I think that, not to be super rude, but Americans are super hobbled in how we interact with our government. You look at most other governments, most other countries, when their government gets as ridiculously out of line as ours has been, especially when you're dealing with a subject like the environment, the people go out into the streets and demand change and often get change. Look what happened in Greece, or look how Iceland dealt with sexism. There's been some really fantastic examples of people actually like being motivated and doing something, but by and large, it feels like Americans have been comfortable for long enough to become kind of complacent. And I think taking to the streets, although tropish, is probably one of the only things people can do. You want to talk about something that people can do? Strike.
General strike. Powerful, man. Man, that's a great take, Jake. Like you got my heart racing with that take right there. Thank you so much. And I want to circle back because Anna had something that she wanted to add in.
Yeah, I just wanted to agree with Jake. I was going to say the exact same thing. We as a society have so much power and so much control over what our government does. The problem is that we have been, I don't want to say brainwashed, but we have been brainwashed to believe that we don't. At the end of the day, the government works for us. We don't work for them. And if we feel that something needs to change, then we need to make our voice heard. We need to go vote for sure, strike when we can. And it's very hard to strike because a lot of people are living paycheck to paycheck, So we go back to a lot of different issues, which we won't go into, people getting paid what they need to get paid or whatever. But there's so much we can do. And I think the first step is voting and demanding that climate change is taught in our schools. Because like Jake said, or someone said, the US pretty much, I mean, I feel like we're one of the only countries that believe climate change is a myth, or that we're doubting it, or it's like, oh no, it's okay, it won't happen here, it will happen elsewhere. It's like, no, California's on fire, Florida floods, there's a lot of other states that have multiple issues. But I think we just need to make it aware that it is a problem. We need to put it in our education. I don't remember being taught about climate change in elementary, middle school. I think was taught about it in high school. But by then I did research myself. It's like, wait, what is this green thing that we have? What kind of trash needs to go there? So it's stuff that I had to learn by myself. So I think education, we need to educate our children, and hopefully, we're making a change right now where they'll have a planet to live in.
Great take, and I wholeheartedly agree. It's about, you have to, before you can change hearts and change actions, you have to change minds, and that starts with education. Just great take. And I want to go to Hannah next.
Yeah, I just wanted to share that, we're all experiencing mental infiltration of doubting science and doubting the answers that there are to what's happening. By having that doubt festering, people are less likely to see what is happening for what it is. Across our nation, many different groups of people from different areas are being affected by global warming and climate change in varying degrees of severity from year to year. I grew up in South Georgia, and I know hurricane season as a common yearly thing that seemed to always be getting worse. Similarly to California, recent years of fire seasons being a real serious thing that is definitely getting worse. And consequences of that are displacement of large swaths of people that can't work and live in the homes that they've been building for a very long time. And we're getting more and more land that is less able to be used for productive means. So we are losing resources. We are having people displaced from their homes. So their uprooted lives means they cannot be productive towards helping promote positive growth in this reality, in this world we're in. And the consequences are just building upon themselves. It's like knowing you're not ready for a game upcoming, and every step along the way, the night before and the morning of, you're just more and more not ready because you have less and less to work with to feel secure. It's just going to get more challenging. So I think people must recognize the fact that doubts are infiltrating our sound space, and it's intentional to fester just uncertainty with what's going on, and the consequences are directly affecting us. And the best way to change things when we know that are directly affecting us is to get up and do something different. And so, yeah, I totally agree that start local, start in our local governments and our communities, bring it to the federal government and the state. Like, we must change this, it's like a social mindset and economical motives, like of the things that drive our nation to success. We have to manipulate those things to work for us in this regard, because otherwise they just won't. They're not designed to do that as it is.
That's deep. Thank you so much for that, Hannah. And I love the point that you continue to make when we're talking about the mindset and making changes, because as Einstein once said, the definition of insanity is doing the exact same thing over and over and expecting a different result. And so we need to actually do something different to get a different result. So thank you so much for that. I want to circle back really quickly to Anna because she wanted to expand on that point that you just made.
Yeah, I really like this. Hannah was able to bring up doubt, because it's such a controlling tool that's being used, you know, by our politicians right now. It's something that keeps us from making change. And if we think about how doubt has controlled us, we'll think about, you know, we have someone in the White House right now that is saying it's not an issue, it's not an issue, it's okay. And a lot of people are believing this, his authority, you know, his title. And it's like, yeah, okay, there's doubt. I don't think it's a real issue, because he wouldn't say it's an issue. He wouldn't lie, right? Which we all know that's not true. But I'm really glad Hannah was able to bring up doubt, because we think about these corporations that are investing millions of dollars into making it seem like it's not real. Like this isn't a real issue that we should be worried about, you know. But it really is. It's an issue. I understand some people have doubt, but there's enough data to prove that climate change is real, is happening faster than we predicted, and that we need to do something about it, regardless if we have doubt or not. The facts are there. Doesn't matter if I'm scared, doesn't matter if I believe in it, doesn't matter if someone else doesn't believe in it. The data is there, and there's either we do nothing about it and the planet just dies, or we make a change and we try to bring this beautiful planet back to its glory.
Oh, Anna, thank you. So, you know, I couldn't have said it better. Thank you so much for that take. I'm going to go to Jake to actually expand on doubt. So doubt's a really big one now. So Jake, take it away.
So rather than talking about like the most obvious meaning of doubt, I'd like to explore philosophically doubting the various sides here. Like on the one hand, you have a group of people, regardless of their skill or background, putting forth information saying, hey, we're on a really bad downhill slide that ends in disaster. Doubt that all you want. That's awesome. The result they're saying is still very threatening. If on the other hand, you doubt the people saying everything's fine, the result they're saying could be great, or if they're wrong, we're all screwed. If you just apply doubt to the various sides, there's only one good choice here. We have to act, and insanely swiftly.
Agreed. I actually like how you came with that from a philosophical perspective, because, you know, it's true. Great take. What I want to do is switch gears a little bit, because we talked a little bit about, you know, climate change from a national security perspective, but I also want to switch to talking about it from an economic perspective. Now, we've touched on it, you know, in a lot of different ways, but I really want to just dig in deep on the economics of climate change. Economics as pertains to the money that's spent when we're leading from behind, dealing with the aftermath of climate change disasters, but also in the opportunity going forward, with the potential of a green future and what that can look like economically on the positive side. I want to start off with Electra, because I would love to just get a little bit more granular detail on the corporate responsibility as it pertains to carbon offsets. I want our viewers to get a little bit more granular detail on that.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I'll say I'm not an expert in carbon offsets, but I will say on the nonprofit and for-profit side, there is a narrative that has changed in the last, I'd say probably 5 to 10 years, where you have an option to offset your carbon footprint. And that sounds well and good. There's a huge, like a big ethics question there. And I'll give you an example. I work for a small nonprofit. We work in the urban forestry sector. We could provide a carbon offset. We could provide a forest, right? But the local airport and air authority purchases offsets in a European country. So the local community is not benefiting directly from that purchase of that offset. Could they do it locally and create kind of like a closed loop, not a closed loop, but like the circular economy, right? So like everything's going here, it's benefiting, and then it exponentially has that ripple effect. That would be great. but it's not happening that way. And then there's this element of greenwashing that happens with ESG. While ESG is great, it has ratings, it has criteria you have to meet, that's fantastic. I think there's not a lot of, well, I'm hoping there are, but I'm not convinced there's a ton of millennials that know as much as the experts do, but they see the top level summary, like, here's a great investing opportunity for you, here's a great company that's done A, B, C, and D, and this is going to help you in E, F, and whatever. So I think there's a little bit of responsibility that the R in CSR is for responsibility. And I don't feel like that's being leveraged enough, because creating a sustainability report, that's great, but they can leave things out. There's no, like, no one's checking like there is an ISO, like you can have a third party audit on things like that. But when it comes to the investor market, corporate responsibility, you can start here and end up over here, and like no one really reads in between, because what you're putting out is a shiny, we're doing awesome things. We've recycled all of our top brand shoes, and all of the rubber is going into playgrounds, and it's all made with organic whatever. It's like it's just an interesting conversation. I watch it kind of on the periphery, but it's something that I'm seeing in some of our clients. They're saying, what can we do to get the millennial dollar? What's it going to take to get you into our store? Do we have to slap an organic label and everything? Which, by the way, organic doesn't mean 100% organic. So people don't know that. They just trust. And while trust is great, who's being held responsible? And that's kind of where I find the problem with that.
Boy, that is interesting. I never think of it that way, and that's why I really wanted you to expand on that, because it's a very interesting concept that I think a lot of us, including our viewers, haven't had the chance to really get that exposure to. I want to continue on the economic perspective, pertaining to the costs of inaction on climate change. I believe there's some studies that say for every 1 degree of rise in the global average temperature, that accounts to, I believe, $1 trillion of lost economic output. I know in the chat, Thor mentioned earlier that we're already suffering from the impacts of climate change from a refugee standpoint. I believe 10 million refugees already. But Thor, could you expand on that from an economic perspective as far as the cost of inaction?
I don't know if I'm the right person to ask for this. I have some particular opinions on the cost, I guess estimating the cost of this kind of thing. I mean, can you put a cost on a human life? I say no. I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, the cost, the cost is the planet. I don't know. The cost is, the rainforests burning. The cost is, I don't know, like turning Earth into Venus, right? I think, but if you're talking about, I mean, I could reiterate what I said before, just with, I mean, being proactive and, focusing on things like mitigation and adaptation to climate change, focusing on, benefiting the most vulnerable populations through providing them with things like, providing everyone with things like healthcare and a place to live and food to eat, like clean water, right? Like just making people's lives better in general not only helps, what Anna was talking about with like helps people appreciate and become more educated and become, be able to contribute more to fixing our issues. But I mean, it inherently just though, because climate change is such a huge issue, it's such a overarching global problem, basically anywhere you can do a little bit of good is going to contribute to helping fix climate change. So anyway, sorry, going off on a little rant there. Rants
are okay.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think we need to be focusing on yeah, just making people's lives better in general, making a functional and livable happily livable society for people here and now. And that it goes a long way towards, fixing the issues that we have with climate change in general.
No, that's a great take, Thor. And I'm going to be coming back to you when we get to our next segment too. So just hold that energy. But Electra has been kind enough to actually get us some facts and figures pertaining to economic costs. Electra, what do you have for us?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of dovetail off that too. There's economic social challenges, right, facing cities and social groups. So I just wanted to throw out there that climate change can lead to those energy shortages, damages in infrastructure, increasing losses of different industries, sectors, downsizing, heat-related mortalities and illnesses that have these cascading effects that I'd spoken about before. And they're just it's so important to just re-emphasize Hannah's earlier point of this kind of, or Tara and Anna's point of interrelatedness of systems. It's so hard to see now, but if you can't fix your topsoil, then the seed is not going to grow, and then you can't feed your people. Like, people don't like, and it's so crucial. And it's not, will we see LA leveled by a tsunami? I don't know. Like, will it be a hurricane that we've never seen in San Francisco? I don't know, but there's these kind of micro changes that we need to catch now. And on the political side, just tying it all, I think this idea of reversing the effects of climate change, that's great, but like you have to slow it down first, if not stop it, before you can reverse it. So that's going to take, I don't even know if that's possible. I don't want to be the downer in this group, but we have to slow the train down.
To be fair, I don't think anyone knows whether or not it's possible at this point, but we need to try.
Exactly. Electra, thank you so much. And I want to circle back to Anna. She had something that she wanted to add.
Definitely need to try. We can't just say, oh, well, we should try. I wanted to talk a little bit about the economy behind this. So I just looked up how much the US spent on federal relief to Puerto Rico. So Congress had allocated $42.5 billion to help after the hurricane that they had 2 years ago. They only received about $14 billion, which is still a lot of money, but not as much as they should have. We could have done so much with $14 billion in Puerto Rico. Like, we could have done so much. So instead of, saying we're just going to throw money into issues, we're just going to throw money into these natural disasters that we're having, we should try to slow it down, try to reverse it, and then use that money for stuff that we actually need. We have so many people in debt because of student loans. We have so many homeless people. We have so many veterans that are homeless. We have so many veterans that unfortunately are being deported. We have so much other issues that we can be using $14 billion for, or the $42.5 billion that was allocated for Puerto Rico. There's so much money. There's so many other issues that we could have used that money for, but instead of using it for those things, for infrastructure, we're putting a Band-Aid on an issue versus fixing the actual issue, which is a shame.
That's a great point, Anna. And, when we talk about the United States and our elected officials, we've all gotten pretty used to Band-Aids, haven't we? And, I say enough of the goddamn Band-Aids, but maybe that's just me. I want to go to Hannah next. She has some interesting information to share with us.
So I was going to share some numbers that so per one of my sources, it would take 140 billion a year to adapt to climate change. And the source says that even though it sounds like a considerable sum of money, is actually less than 0.1% of the global GDP. I'm just dumbfounded, wowed by the reality of how small that is compared to what is actually out there. The question of, do we have the funds for this, just simply isn't a factor. It's, will they be used for this?
Yeah.
That's shocking to me. 1% of the global GDP. 1%.
0.1%.
Oh, sorry.
Oh my God.
0.1%. And yet we're worried about, do we have the money for this? I mean, I don't want to say the US should pay for everything because obviously not, but we're the richest country in the world, I'm saying. And I mean, 0.1%.
Yeah,
Like-
I think, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I think like a huge part of that, I didn't read this paper, I'm not entirely sure, but I know like a huge part of, well, so we've been throwing around these terms, mitigation and adaptation a lot, just to, I don't know, for anyone who might not understand them entirely, mitigation is basically talking about what we can do to slow down or stop or potentially reverse climate change. And then adaptation is sort of thrown in the towel in a way, like, just saying, okay, what can we do because the climate is changing and it will be changing for a long time. What can we do to help, like, adapt to this new environment that we live in? Potentially much harsher environment, definitely much harsher environment. To your point, Anna, and going back a little bit to cost as well. A lot of the responses, the things that we would need to do to help mitigate and adapt to climate change are like restoring the environments that we've destroyed. Like, for instance, restoring wetland environments. Wetland environments are huge buffers to natural disasters like hurricanes and storms, flooding. They're huge buffers that stave off those kinds of natural disasters. But they also, so they help us adapt, but they also help us mitigate climate change because they're huge CO2 sinks, right? They suck up a bunch of CO2 out of the atmosphere, the plants and everything in the soil. And so, when you're talking about like, how much it would cost to do these kinds of things, we're restoring ecosystems. These are self-sustaining things. Like, you need to put in the initial effort and a little bit of effort to upkeep them as well. But the more you put into ecosystems, they're self-sustaining. That's like initial cost, and then, oh hey, it works on its own, right? So anyway, I just, to the point of why it's so cheap, I feel like that's a huge reason why, right?
That's a great point, Thor. Especially when we're talking about self-sustaining ecosystems, you put in the initial investment, and literally what you do from that point is just get the hell out of the way and don't screw it up and let nature take its course. What better way can you ask for to make life easy and less complicated? Invest, get the hell out of the way, and let Earth do its thing. Because you can wind the clock, 5,000 years from now, and if humans were no longer here 5,000 years from now, this Earth will do its thing and it'll be like nothing ever happened. So, get the hell out of the way. I want to circle back real quick to Anna because she had something that she wanted to add.
Yeah, I can add a link to this article. It was written by the NRDC in 2008. And they pretty much said that if global warming goes unchecked, including hurricane, real estate, energy, and water costs, the annual price tag to the US alone will be $1.9 trillion.
Wow.
Annual. That's a large amount of cash,
Wow.
which again, circle back, what can we actually be doing with that money? We can do so much with that money. So we'll definitely include a link for that.
Perfect. And Anna, you actually have provided me the best segue ever, because going into our one of our last segments of the evening is actually going to be dealing with climate change and politics. So this is where we're going to get the chance to really hit these hot button issues and really hit the nitty gritty on what's going on in Washington, what's going on in our state houses. And I actually want to start off with Jake on this one. When we're talking about hot button political items that have been swept under the rug, I would like to spend some time discussing the Green New Deal and why it's now sitting on a bookshelf getting cobwebs. Jake, what are your thoughts on the Green New Deal? And do you feel that Joe Biden has done enough to implement the tenets of the Green New Deal into his climate plan?
So the Green New Deal, I think, is a great first step. It's a good idea, and it would be kind of like spark to the powder keg, get the motion going. But I never thought it went far enough. I'd like to see a whole lot more involved in it. I think that Biden and Kamala Harris they were never my first pick. And I think that what we're doing right now in the election, not to be sidetracked into politics, but as it relates to the environment, is hoping to buy ourselves a couple minutes on the doomsday clock, period. We're facing midnight. And if we could get a climate arsonist out of the political hot seat and replace him with somebody who cared, we might buy ourselves just a little bit of time.
That's a great take. And what I wanted to actually focus on initially too is on top of the Green New Deal. First of all, before I switch, does anyone have looks like Thor has a take. Thor, jump in here.
Hey, yeah, sorry, more takes. Yeah, no, I agree with Jake. I feel like the Green New Deal is a great, it's a good scaffold for more legislation. I know that, I don't know, in the United States, it's hard as an individual to look at the whole climate and to be like, oh no, it's all on fire, everything's horrible, what do I even do about this? So I mean, most people's focus and attention is on their, like Anna was saying, their paycheck, right? Like paycheck to paycheck, what they're gonna do. And the Green New Deal does have some, like, I mean, almost half of it, like a quarter of it is, by the way, it's like 7 pages, and it's double spaced, squished, like it is very readable. So I highly recommend everyone just read it. It's online. You can just Google Green New Deal PDF. Please read it. Yeah, there's a huge section, I think it's section 4, that talks specifically just about like, yeah, jobs, like how we can, boost the economy, like everything, everything economy and jobs and all the stuff that will be created from this. Yeah, and I'll let you continue on your discussion.
No, this is good. This is good stuff. This is what I wanted. This is what I want to hear, and this is what the audience needs to hear. And I'm going to have Jake follow up on that.
So just to respond to you saying that it seems like people don't see climate change directly, I think you're right. Most people are focused a little bit more on getting food for the next meal and dealing with that next paycheck issue. I grew up in California through the 90s, and what I remember most about the environment was that it rained aggressively. Like I remember in the mid 90s, they had to rip up most of the streets in San Francisco because they were flooding every year and they needed more infrastructure to handle it. So I've also lived here in the 2000s and 20 teens or whatever you call them, and it's dry as a bone. The place is on fire. So climate change looks really, really obvious from where I'm sitting. And I'm sure that some people haven't had to see it, but take a look at Arizona. They're hitting 120s, 130s. Like, that's scary. That's genuinely bad, and they're setting records every year. So, I mean, maybe people aren't seeing it because they're not looking. But if they, to use a super broken analogy, not analogy, but a reference, like pull your head out of the sand. Like it's everywhere around you.
Jake, can I ask a quick follow-up question? What's rain? What's rain?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure.
Nice.
I haven't heard of that.
I haven't seen it.
You mean acid rain?
Well, quick clarification. I wasn't saying I don't think people like, I agree with everything you said. I was mostly talking about like even people who can see it as a huge problem. It's like, what do I even like? It's okay. It's beyond my scope. It's not the thing that's on your everyday like mind, because you have to live first and then
totally. I get
deal with the globe.
Well, people are also not seeing it because it's becoming the new normal. it's okay, California's on fire. Okay, that's normal. You know, Florida, it floods. Okay, that's normal. It happens,
Well,
which is unfortunate.
That's a really good end.
well, we have to make a new normal. We got to make a new normal. Electra wanted to get in.
Yeah, I wanted to add to, and I'm sure we're all kind of on the same page here, but the politicizing of climate change, super detrimental. It's just not going to help anybody. Green New Deal, I do agree. I agree with that. Just because it helps everyone. It's not one side or the other, but it's by politicizing it, we've made it about, we versus them, and it's just like COVID-19, where it's like it's not me, but it might be them. Then there's shaming involved, and then reframing and tying climate change to personal experience seems to be the most useful way to kind of garner support. But by the time many of us experience climate change at a drastic level, having to leave our house, or you can't breathe, or your neighborhood's burning down, it's too late. And we talked about education and awareness, but at the day-to-day level, it comes down to changing our habits. And that's hard to do. People don't like change in general, and habit changing is really hard. Pressuring companies to change their unsustainable processes and demanding politicians to adopt aggressive environmental policies, it needs to happen from everybody. It's not just, one side or the other. I think we should stop politicizing this issue.
Yes, and that's a great point, Electra. And of course, as history shows right now, we politicize everything. We've politicized mask wearing. That's definitely a good point. I want to switch gears for a second. We have a really good question from our viewer, from Drew Daito. I hope I said that right. Can you guys highlight some of the more controversial pieces of the Green New Deal and why they become such moderate/conservative fodder? So Drew, thank you very much for that question. And Thor, I think you had something that you wanted to say regarding that.
Yeah. So I think a lot of the antagonism of the Green New Deal kind of comes from, I don't know, maybe people not necessarily reading it. Like, for instance, and I don't want to, it's, who wants to read like some piece of legislation someone wrote up somewhere, right? I'm not blaming anyone, but it is only 7 pages. So, just check it out. Very, very small. It's very short. Yeah, so I feel like, that's given a lot of people, I don't know, the stereotype behind green, right? Of like, oh, they're going to take away our airplanes. They're going to take away our cars. They're going to, whatever. And just to kind of respond to that aspect of it, I'm not sure if there's something specific Drew wanted to tackle, but there's no negative, like there's no text in the Green New Deal that says specifically to take things away, besides saying reduce our carbon emissions and any new things that we do add, try to make sure that they're sustainable. Like, it doesn't say anything about taking anything away, just specifically talks about reducing carbon emissions. And that, I don't know, there's all sorts of awesome technologies, I'm sure, and ways we can, get around it. For instance, it talks about building high-speed rails, right? Like, I think that's an incredibly important thing, that can help, I don't know. And it also makes jobs. If you care about jobs, it does it. It makes them. So anyway, I highly recommend reading through it. And if you have any specific questions about it.
Well, I want to keep digging into this rabbit hole, because Drew actually had a pretty, a reasonable response to that. At 7 pages, there's no way that it can give the amount of depth it needs for what it's trying to achieve. And I'll speak to that for a quick second, Drew. I think what the Green New Deal is designed to be is a starting point, is a mechanism to start the conversation and to fill in the details. And I think, Drew, what we need to get to as a country is get back to where we have an administration and a government that actually believes in science and has scientists and people who are able to ascertain research and data in charge of drafting these things. And so when we look at the highlights of the Green New Deal, transitioning to a net zero carbon economy, redoing our infrastructure with high-speed rail, being more efficient as it pertains to our agriculture. These are all things that can be fleshed out in committees, that can be fleshed out in hearings with scientists and stakeholders and citizens. And so
I'm so sorry to interrupt. I misspoke. It is actually 14 pages. So I'm sorry, it's twice as long. And on top of that, that's as long as the New Deal legislation was as well. It's the same length as the New Deal itself. So take that as you will. Sorry.
No, we're pretty much there, because, again, we're having an active conversation, and I'm definitely, appreciated that. And so I actually want to take another question from actually one of our regular panelists, Tyler. And so, and Tyler asked, how do you create jobs for those that will lose, through the industries that will be closed by, the Green New Deal or any sort of climate change legislation similar to that? And so, Hannah, if you could start off by taking that first part of the question, and then we can kind of go round robin.
So this was about creating jobs for those changes, basically.
Yeah.
So I am, maybe I'm not thinking of all the things, but I'm hesitant to, I feel like those that should be hurting the most from this should be those that have the resources to hurt. I don't know exactly how the Green New Deal is going to affect the individual labor worker. I know that through the changes that we need to make to combat global warming, new jobs will need to be made of all sorts of degrees and skill sets. So as long as the people that have the capacity to make the jobs, they have the funding resources, they have the plans for redrafting ways that we use and work with energy, those corporations, those businesses that are doing the bigger picture work of how to change their companies to better facilitate jobs that are effective for this time and age. I would hope that the people that are labor workers or everyday Joes should not take the hit on this, that new jobs will pop up as the industry makes the shift. And one of the few things about the way that our nation works that I really appreciate is that we are we use ingenuity to some magnum degree. We're very capable of coming up with new content, new jobs, new resources and materials and tools, and each of those things bring with them opportunity. And so I would think that the one job change to another job, that there's going to be entry level work as times change and the needs start to be fulfilled. And that I just hope that those that really take the cut actually are those that can afford the cut. That's in my opinion, only right way forward.
I like that, Hannah. That's very, very nuanced and very fair. I wanted to bring Anna in on this one because I want to expand kind of on what Tyler as well as Drew are saying when we're talking about, taxing, who's going to pay more. But Anna, I want you to expand on this from a cultural perspective, because when we talk about trying to enact change or the Green New Deal or dealing with climate change, we're also dealing with people who may be in West Virginia who have worked in the coal mines their whole lives for generations, or people who work in the oil and gas industry and they've been pipeline workers and drillers their whole life. Almost, they may be able to transition technically into a new job, but culturally, when your whole identity and that of your family is based on this industry, it's almost like a piece of your heart is being ripped out. And I think until we can talk to people emotionally and let them know that it's okay, I think people are going to continue to be hesitant to being accepting of drastic changes. What are your thoughts on that, Anna?
I think you're right. It's going to take some effort to have people transition their mind, because that's literally one of the things that, I mean, our job kind of identifies us, like for me, I think about, okay, I work at the bank. I'm a specialized banker. This is what I do. This is a part of who I am. But when we go back to it, we need to realize that, yeah, it's what I do. It's not who I am. It is a cultural thing, I think, but not really. I want to go back. I really think it's more of a paycheck to paycheck type of thing. And if we can have well-paying jobs that provide clean energy, that provide everything that we need to move us in that direction for climate change, then I think people are going to be okay with it. I prefer having a job that pays well, that gives me good benefits, that provides a good 401k, and I know is good for the environment, than a job that I'm at risk of getting sick. My family doesn't have the healthcare they need, I don't have the income that I need to provide for my family. So I think there's a lot of different things, but I'm a firm believer that if we provide a living wage, good healthcare, a good 401k, people would be more than willing to transfer over. There will be a few people that are fearful, and they have the right to be, but again, if we give people what they need, I think they should be fine. I know there's a lot, and I say that because I know there's a few companies that I applied for a few years ago when I was looking, and I saw how they were treating their employees. I saw what they were doing for the environment. I was like, I don't want to work for them. There's a company now that anyone that knows me and knows me well, it was my dream company to work for. After COVID, I saw what happened. And it's like, I can't work in the finance department. I can't. So, yeah.
Good take. Thank you so much, Anna. And I believe Tara wanted to jump in. Tara, take it away.
Yeah, I don't think there would be any shortage of jobs for the people who work in the oil industry and stuff, just because we need so much infrastructure to be able to, you know, not use so much CO2. Like we need like railways and all of these things. And I think what would be really a good cultural way to affect this is like, is if we, and it's true too, is if we frame it as like this, our like great grandchildren will view us as heroes if we're able to like stop climate change. Like if like they think that like World War II veterans are like cool, like the people who like actually like save all like mammalian life on Earth, like they will be like, oh my God, they will be revered for the rest of human history. And like people are like so ready to like sacrifice things for like their nation and their family and stuff. They're ready to like go to war. And so I don't think that like switching jobs is actually going to be like that big of a deal, as long as it's like framed in this like totally truthful way of like they're being like heroes and saving all of humanity.
Nice. Can I ask a follow-up question, Tara? And because we're technically talking about the political realm, and so I know what a lot of people talk about is if these jobs were to be gone, right, and they make the sacrifice and they're transitioning over to a new job, if they're not made whole as far as economically, what are your thoughts on UBI, Universal Basic Income, to cover that shortfall?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think that we should really do everything possible to save the climate as much as possible. And I think like UBI, definitely, like if people don't have to go to work, like don't make them do these like bullshit jobs, that are just like bad for the environment anyway. That just, there's so many bullshit jobs out there. I don't know if I'm allowed to.
Yes, you are.
So yeah, I do believe in that for as many people as possible too, really.
Nice. Tara, thank you so much. And Jake has a follow-up on UBI. Jake, take it away.
there've only been a handful of real studies done on UBI, so it's not something we have a lot of valid data on. But of those studies, they have almost universally shown that not only is there not a sudden lack of will to work, but primarily what you get is what you're doing when you provide universal basic income is assuring the bottom rungs of Maslow's hierarchy are met, and after that, people get creative and they do things that are more passionate from the heart, and those people tend to create things that are massively beneficial for the economic infrastructure of their immediate environment, and potentially much greater than that, depending on how important what they make is. So I think creating anytime you talk about any problem in America, it's like, well, what about these other things? We've already touched on education and economics and a handful of other things, and that's because things are problematic right now. But UBI would be huge for creating just a baseline of more people who aren't exhausted and stressed can do more. And if what we need is like the entirety of humanity to flex and lift and do everything they can to pull us out of this disaster, well, then exhausted people can't do that. And UBI might help us get out of that.
Jake, you're onto something there. Think of it this way: we have people that are working 2 and 3 jobs and menial jobs trying to survive, worrying about how they're going to have medicine so they don't die, worried about how they're going to feed themselves and their families, worried about how they're going to have a roof over their head and not get evicted. How can people who are stretched to the absolute limit ever think about ways to better humanity or be creative or create that next business? So you're really on to something on that. So thank you for sharing that. I know Hannah wanted to jump in on this one next. Hannah, take it away.
I just wanted to highlight the benefits that we've all received from the Works Progress Administration through FDR after the Great Depression. This was a program that put unemployed workers to work at a time where the economy was like at a halt, and similar to where we're at now with this, the extremes that we're facing. I think with a combination of something similar, but that also calls on the minimum wage needs to be at a place that is reasonable and appropriate. And we know how little the minimum wage has shifted over the years. Basically not especially compared to what corporates are making in their growth over the years. So I think there is a combination of efforts that can be given to ensure that the workers that are leaving the oil rig and have been doing this for 20 plus years, and they've built up a cost of living that they need to survive with. But if their jobs are going out the door, it's a really legitimate question, like how are they going to make it? And I think that we are capable of creating jobs programs that utilize their expertise as experienced workers and managers and doers, and that these people can be trained in new fields, and that they might be in similar fields, like they might still work in energy, but a different kind of use of energy. And that when we couple that with redistributing what minimum wage really looks like in our country and making that more appropriate, that it is a possible transition. And unfortunately, it is a necessary transition. We don't really have a choice. We either sink with this country and this world, or we put our minds and our research together and redraft a new way of doing this. And the good news is that we've done something like this in the past, and it did great things for our country. And I know that it's possible. We have an example of how it's done before. And I think people just need to trust and do and work together.
That's a great take, Hannah, as always. you're always so measured, and it just everything you say always makes so sense, and I appreciate that. I want to have Jake jump in real quick to respond to some of the comments.
To respond to one of our panelists, Tyler, asking about whether UBI would make us more dependent on the government, I think that that's one take on UBI. There's potentially numerous roads to UBI, and I'm not the most well versed, but I am aware of at least one or two attempts by individuals to leverage blockchain interactions and in the cryptoverse to create universal basic income. Take a look. It's really interesting. I think that dependency on the government is a very frightening potential, but it's not necessarily the only way we could create a universal basic income. That money is generated by taxations and various fees here and there, but we could also apply that to, our own system.
Great take, Jake. Thor, I know you have as well.
Yeah, I'm a little skeptical myself of blockchain systems, just in terms of the amount of energy that they require to use, and especially if you're going to implement it on such a vast scale. That, I mean, as an environmental, someone who is considers themselves an environmentalist, that is a horrifying idea to me. Just the exponential increase in energy usage that blockchain technology requires based on servers and stuff. Anyway, that's besides the point. I'm a little bit weary of that. What were we talking about? Something else. Anyway, yeah, I mean, yeah, I feel like this idea of like people quote unquote depending on the government, I don't really like. I mean, I don't know, everything is made up of other people, right? Like, I mean, we are just creating systems that depend on other people, whether it's corporations that are made up of people, whether it's local communities that are made up of people, whether it's, national governments that are made up of people. We're relying on other people to survive. And so, I mean, I feel like the difference between government and corporations, for instance, though, is corporations are beholden to basically, yeah, they're investors and, pretty much no one else, right? Like themselves and their investors, whereas governments are beholden to the people, like the people who elect them into office, ideally. Obviously, it breaks down, all over the place. But I think this is a good opportunity to kind of, I guess, go back to something I think Electra and everyone has brought up at this point, probably, focusing on local, right? I mean, really like getting to know your community, getting involved in your community, having local representatives that actually represent you. I mean, like becoming active in those ways, I think is understanding where your influences are and how you can, better get involved in those ways and take care of each other just around you in your circle, and then help, elevate that to other levels of communities and organizations that can help each other. I think that's really the way to go. I mean, whether that's through UBI, whether that's through universal benefits like universal healthcare and universal housing, whatever, I think it's going to have to come from the communities that we build with each other.
Thor, great take. Thank you. Tara, I know you wanted to add.
Yeah, I think we're all just so dependent on our government already for our tap water, the roads we drive, our sidewalks. And I think that it's not a bad thing. I mean, I think that the people should be able to depend on our government. It should be there to help us. And actually, like, the role of the government is to protect its citizens from criminals, which are in many times, or most of the times, really corporations. They're there to protect us from the exploitation of these more powerful players. So I think as long as the government were like good and actually looking out for us, I think it would be actually like ideal if we could like depend on them to make sure that all of our needs were always met. Oh, and I don't think that, oh, sorry, I was reading things from the chat. I don't know if I should respond. I'm sorry.
No, if you have a response, please go for it. That's totally great.
Okay. No, I don't. I think that you're allowed, of course, you're allowed to have freedom of speech and still get your UBI. That would, those two things aren't related whatsoever.
Nice. Anna, I know you want to jump in.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna probably be the bad one in this case when it comes down to UBI. I just looked it up and I can add a link to this. I'm not very knowledgeable, so I'm actually learning a lot with you about this from you guys. So I just looked it up and found that Finland actually tried this, but they stopped it after, I want to say, a year and a half, 2 years, because their unemployment rate hit the highest in 17 years, up to 10%, because so many people were depending on this. Canada did the same thing. After 2 years, they stopped it for the same reason. So I agree, our government should help us when we need it. Definitely when we're transitioning from, these jobs that are not contributing to climate change to jobs that will contribute. Of course, let's use it. We have something in place. I don't know how much I agree with having such a system in place after that. So definitely use it for that transition, but after that, I don't know how much I agree with it. And I can actually add a link, and you guys can read the article for yourself.
Yeah, please do. Thank you for that take. This is awesome. I'm gonna have Jake jump back in here. Jake, you're still muted.
Tyler asked if being dependent on the government for UBI could mean that they could say not like something you do and therefore take your UBI. And I think it's in the answer to that is really in the name. It's universal basic income. It doesn't matter if you're a crack addict, you get your universal basic income and hopefully some care at the same time. In terms of oh, I'm sorry, I lost what you said last there, Anna. Now I don't know how I was going to respond. We can move on.
Jake, while you're still here, can you actually take some time to respond to Drew? I'm going to read his comment, and I want you to jump in on that one as well. Yeah, I don't want to get off track, but more dependent on the government. Everyone is against it until it benefits them. Farmers, veterans, corporations, and subsidies are nothing new and probably not very scary to people.
I mean, I'm right behind Tara with the idea that we shouldn't be dependent on the government is a little bit warped, and it's worked by we've had some pretty incompetent leadership lately, and I don't mean just in the last 4 years. I mean like the last 30 or so years, maybe longer. It's hard to say. I've said it on like half the podcasts now. Almost all of our problems are because of inappropriate resource allocation. This is a prime example of it. We could be benefiting the people with our taxation, and we do wildly little of that. And I think it's as simple as that. All I have to say is we should be dependent on our government because it should be reliable. And if we have a problem there, like yet another thing we should probably have a podcast on.
We might have to. Drew, Tyler, thank you both for some really, really good commentary, which actually brings us to our final segment. It's more of a round robin. Basically, how can we change the trajectory of climate, of politics, of everything? So this is really taking everything that we've discussed tonight and kind of putting it all together in kind of like a how-to or what's next. what can we do individually and collectively? And more importantly, what truly does happen if we do nothing? And this includes best case and worst case scenarios. And Thor, I'm going to start off with you. Sum us up.
Wow. All right. Let's see if we can do this. So I think okay. I feel like action needs to take place at pretty much every level, right? We've been talking about sort of these three main spheres of influence, like the individual and community level, the corporate level, and the government level, right? And I feel like all three of these things interact with each other they each influence one another, right? People can vote in, vote laws, they can vote who they want to represent them into government, and governments can create legislation that regulates or deregulates corporations, et cetera, et cetera. So I feel like the biggest things we can do right now as individuals, because it can all seem so grand and scary. I for sure know that feeling. I feel like the biggest thing you can do is get involved, right? Just get involved with, grab a few friends, go vote, build a community, find out who has influence in your community, find out if you have influence, what kind of influence you have in your community. Talk to people and, work together. And whether or not that's working on things that are related to, restoring wetlands or, greening your city, or if it's things like, creating some sort of universal care for just like your city or your state or your region. I think, the first step is to, do your best to get involved and help people as much as you can. Help people who need that help and who otherwise wouldn't be able to themselves get involved.
Nice. Thank you very much, Thor. Jake, take us away with your closing.
I have two responses. On the one hand, I think we all probably know somebody who is skeptical, and we can have conversations with those people. We can sit and talk in open-hearted ways without condescension and without preaching, because to be a dick, we're hella right and we should be preaching and they should be goddamn listening, but that does not ever win. So coming to them and discussing their ideas and then maybe introducing a flaw, hey, what do you think about this, and working a little bit more and more until maybe they're seeing a bigger picture or a better version of the picture they're seeing. And as a more my style response, because that's political and very the right way to do it, we have two options. We can act or we cannot, period. We can act real hard or we cannot, and that's it. And those options look like, if we take action, we have the potential for a future like, Star Trek or something. And if we don't, we get Mordor. Take your pick.
Couldn't picture it in more starker terms, man. Great take. Electra, take us away.
Yeah, everybody's talked on many of the things I would share, but just some unique ones that I've found really helpful is creating a green team at work. That builds awareness. Sometimes people don't even know why they have a recycling bin. Those conversations work. Getting behind, investing in, and supporting organizations that are already doing the heavy lifting. You don't have to build your own sustainability firm. You just have to get behind and support the organizations that they built the foundation, right? Another thing just to note would be to read your local climate action plan, understand what your local representatives have already drafted on your behalf, and how that's changing, and if you can get involved in the conversation at the council level even. And then lastly, just to kind of circle back to Thor's earlier comment, embracing change, adapting, and being willing to put in the work. And when you do that, make it something that you love, that you're passionate about, or that touches something that matters to you, whether it's clean air for your children or water for your, the natural world. If it's investments. If it's, you want to see Nike do better, you know, ask for their report, read it, educate yourself, bring that knowledge to other people, start the conversation, and make it something that you enjoy. If there's an element and you love trees, come on down to San Diego. I can talk trees all day. You know, we'll engage you, we'll bring you out, volunteer, be a part of it, and just, yeah, get excited about an element of it. You don't have to fix all of it. We're doing it together, and that's how that's going to progress.
Great point, Alexia. Hannah.
I would piggyback on that. Get excited about something about it. I think that everywhere right now, people are facing a lot more stress than we're used to, and there are many people that don't necessarily have the outlets that they normally would have, as far as what they could get involved in, or meeting up with people and getting out there and being able to be social. And with all the ways that we feel limited and like power or options are taken away, there is just as much opportunity out there for us to put our energy into our local happenings regarding the climate. Definitely with local governments. I was filling out my ballot this past week, and realizing that of the local governor options that were listed, I had not been conscious of those people prior to sitting down with my voting registration content. And just this option that I saw of recognizing, well, there's even a step further there. I could be looking up those people ahead of time and really getting a little bit more detailed in what is happening in my local government, and what about that am I not interested in? What do I disagree with? Is there anything in that I want to grab onto and go all the way with it? And I think people have to find something that inspires them for them to really take action on it. And so the more that we're willing to observe, read, invest a little bit, keep looking until you find something that sparks your heart and makes you want to do. And then when you find that thing, just dig into it. One beautiful example that I got a couple of years ago was working with someone that is really detailed on how she separates her recycling. And before then, I had not had a solid practice of this and had not looked up all what you do with certain types of plastics. And just by working with her, I got to adapt new practices and had new convictions about what I wanted to do with my waste. I think it can be as simple as that. And if we just take something and go all the way with it, we really can make an impact. And that could be your thing. And it's something that we can definitely take as power and action that we have. And at a time like right now, that's really valuable.
Well said, Hannah. Thank you so much. Jake, you have something really quickly.
Oh, no, I was just
Yeah.
supporting I was agreeing.
Wise man.
Yes, I agree with what everyone has said so far also. And also I want to add that to not forget that you have a voice and a say in what your government does, and to be courageous and welcoming and like willing enough to like go out in the streets and demand it and fight for it.
Love it. Have that courage. Anna, what you got for us?
Yeah, I'm gonna go a different route and not speak about what I can do as an individual, since everyone has already said it. And I'm gonna speak about points that I think corporations can do to help with climate change. And I think they can measure and analyze their greenhouse emission, reduce their energy consumption, reduce their waste, and optimize employee transportation. And I thought this was really interesting because I've seen this, or I saw that point in multiple articles that I read, from an article written like 15 years ago to one that was just written by Salesforce last year, in January. So it's something that people are saying, hey, you can do this. It's been going on for a while. Companies and corporations can choose greener infrastructure and equipment, and decide who they want their suppliers to be. Who do you want your vendors to be? And have them, you know, if they're not going green, do you really want to do business with them? And I think most importantly, raise awareness between your employees, your clients, and your shareholders and stakeholders, you know, and just promote a environmentally free or environmentally friendly way of working, which can also mean, you know, instead of having everyone come in for a meeting or whatever, just Zoom it out. And lastly, I think mobilize for your climate change. Like everyone has been saying, you know, demand that your politicians go green, demand that they stand for what you believe in. Again, they work for us, we don't work for them. I want to touch a little bit on what Electra said, understanding your recycle bin. There's a city in North Carolina that my friend lives in that they actually got rid of their recycle bin. And I was shocked to hear about that, especially because everyone is, you know, we're all caring about our environment. This movement has been going on for a while. So understand what your recycle bin is there for. Know that the government's paying to have that there. So utilize it. If you don't utilize it, yeah, they'll take it away because they have, and they are.
Can I just add real quick? Curiously, the opposite is happening in California. People are removing the trash bin to make people aware of what they're creating. So I think it's a curious, comparison.
What I've noticed here in California, the trash cans are actually getting smaller. Like it looks like, oh my gosh, that's a child can move that versus the big ginormous one that most people have or used to have.
As a quick little factoid about the recycling bins, I'm from Marin County. I know a bunch of us are in Marin. The recycling bins that you see at the street side were started by the Marin Recycling Center, and that idea has spread across the country, and organizations that want to start good recycling in their area actually come visit our recycling center because it's so ridiculously well designed. And I had the opportunity to work in there a number of times with another job I had, and it was really cool. That is an awesome space, and they do great stuff in there.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I had no idea. Why, you know, I'd like to thank everybody tonight on the panel, especially Tara, our newcomer. Thor did wonderful, and our normal panel. Also, is great to see Electra. You know, having this discussion tonight, it actually doesn't make me feel more afraid. It actually makes me feel more hopeful. If we can engage in conversations like we did tonight and spread knowledge and spread understanding, you know, I truly do believe one person can make a difference. Each of us all in our own individual ways, speaking up, using our voices, being the change that we want to see, and just spreading that to the next person and just touching that next person. And that's how movements are made. That's how change is made. And, you know, I'd like to quote one of my favorite heroes growing up, Captain Planet. The power is yours. And so, Captain Planet, he's a hero, gonna take pollution down to zero. He's our powers magnified, and he's fighting on the planet side. Earth, fire, wind, water, heart. Go planet. Thank you so much for all of our audience, for the comments. Definitely like and subscribe and follow Project SIP. We will be back this Thursday with our regular bi-weekly episode. Tune in. With that, everybody have a wonderful evening and be the change that you seek. Good night, everybody.
Night.